Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Board of Education. At this time, I move that we go into executive session under 12122G1 of the Ohio Revised Code for the purposes of personnel.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Whiter?
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. We will return in approximately 30 to 40 minutes. Thank you. Okay. We are back from executive session, and I move to close out come out of executive session at 5:50. It's been moved and second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Mrs. Cleveland?
Mrs. Cleveland?
I think she's still on there.
You might be on mute.
Okay. Maybe she stepped away for a minute. Mrs. Cleveland? Mhm. I'll go ahead.
Mrs. Wider?
Yes. And the motion passes. And we thank you. We will resume in a few minutes with our tax budget hearing. Thank you.
She's going into the rest of the organizational meeting.
Oh, now? All right. You need to,
What?
well, we're going into the organizational meeting now. You need a minute? Go ahead.
We have 15 minutes.
I thought we did. I was wrong. Okay, at this time, I call to order the organizational meeting of the Princeton Board of Education for January 11th, 2021. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland? Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Motion passes. At this time, nominations for president.
It's me.
Yeah.
Okay. I move that Lillian Hawkins be nominated and elected as president for
Second.
the,
Oh, great.
sorry,
She seconded.
Seconded.
It's been moved and second. All right, Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Moore?
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah.
That's-
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
yes.
Mrs. Cleveland? Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes. And the motion passes. And I thank you very much for that nomination. Next, we need nomination of vice president.
I move that Susan Wider be selected as vice president of the school board.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland? Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mrs. Cleveland.
I was trying to get off mute. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. And the motion passes. At this time, we do the oath of office?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And we'll start with the president. We're going to stay in our places
All right.
to be COVID correct.
Okay, thank you.
I
I, Lillian Hawkins,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge my duties
discharge my duties
as president
as president
of the Board of
of
Education
the Board of Education
of the Princeton City School District,
of the Princeton City School District,
Hamilton County, Ohio,
Hamilton County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
and in accordance with the laws
and in accordance with the law
now in effect
now in effect
and hereafter to be enacted
and hereafter to be enacted
during my continuance
during my continuance
in said office
in said office
and until
and until
my successor is chosen and qualified.
my successor is chosen and qualified.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Susan Wider, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
I, Susan Wider,
Susan Wider,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge my duties
discharge my duty
as Vice President
as Vice President
of the Board of Education
of the Board of Education
of Princeton City School District,
of Princeton City School District,
Hamilton County, Ohio,
Hamilton County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
and in accordance
and in accordance
with the laws
with the law
now in effect
now in effect
and hereafter
and hereafter
to be enacted
to be enacted
during my continuance
during my continuance
in said office
in said office
and until my successor
and until my successor
is chosen and qualified.
is chosen and qualified.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Please.
Well, thank you. That kind of makes it official.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to serve and to lead the Board of Education, so thank you.
Oh, one more thing.
Yes.
Here's your-
Thank you. And so we will continue with our organizational items. Next is approval of a resolution approving standing authorizations for the superintendent of the Princeton City School District. Can I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve the resolution approving standing authorizations for the superintendent of the Princeton City School District to enable the superintendent to carry out necessary district duties for calendar year 2021.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
The motion passes. Next item, resolution approving standing authorizations for the treasurer.
I move to approve the resolution approving the standing authorizations for the treasurer of the Princeton City School District to enable the treasurer to carry out necessary district duties for calendar year 2021.
A second? I will second it. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
And the motion passes. Next item, I move that we appoint Gina Ruffin-Moore as the legislative liaison for OSBA and,
Second. Oh, I'm sorry.
and myself, Lillian Hawkins, as alternate.
Second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved in second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item of business is the OSBA membership for 2021. Can I have a motion?
Move that membership
I'm-
in the OSBA for 2021 be
Membership for
approved.
2021.
Second.
Okay, has moved in second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes, motion passes. Next item, OSBA 2021 Legal Assistance Fund. Motion?
I move that membership in the OSBA Legal Assistance Fund at a cost of $250 for year 2021 be approved.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Mrs. Petter?
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore.
Yes.
and the motion passes. Next item is Student Achievement Liaison.
I move
I move
that.
that-
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I move that Susan Wider be appointed as Princeton's Student Achievement Liaison to the OSBA at the 2021 Princeton Board of Education organizational meeting and serve until the 2022 organizational meeting with, I can't remember who we wanted as an alternate.
Gina Ruffin Moore.
Me as the alternate.
So yes, if you could add that onto your motion.
And with Gina Ruffin Moore as alternate.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
and that motion passes. Next item is Tax Abatement Liaison. I move that the Tax Abatement Liaison be John Simons with alternate Mary Cleveland for the 2021 year.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
and the motion passes. Next item is approval of Board Service Fund budget for 2021. I'm moved that we set our board service budget at $15,000 for the 2021 school year.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Just for the point of discussion, we can have up to $20,000 for that. We have been trying to cut back on our portion of that, and since we have been virtual this year a lot, I don't anticipate that we will need that. Should there be a need, we can access it later, but that was the reason for the $15,000 rather than the $20,000. Any other discussion or questions?
Do we have an idea of how much we spent last year, just out of curiosity? Since most of the year we were in,
Yes,
I can't tell you the exact number, but it was very low. If I had to estimate, it would be less than $5,000 last year.
I just wondering if it even hit anywhere near the threshold. Okay, thank you.
Since both typical conferences that the board attends were both virtual, the only cost was registration. So
Okay.
the costs were low.
yes. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder.
Yes.
motion passes. Next item, approval of the Ohio Education Policy Institute membership.
I move to approve.
The Ohio Education Policy Institute 2021 membership.
Second.
It has been moved in second. That membership fee is $1,500. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes, motion passes. Next item, approval of resolution of waiver of reading minutes.
I move to approve the waiver of reading minutes from previous meetings in accordance with section 3313.26 Ohio Revised Code and existing district policy.
I second it. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
yes,
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes,
Mrs. Moore?
yes,
and the motion passes. Approval of legal services for 2021. I move that we approve Ennis Britton, Dinsmore, and Scholas as our legal services for the 2021 year.
second,
It's been moved in second. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
yes,
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
yes,
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
And the motion passes. Approval of resolution authorizing the treasurer to file a modified tax budget for 2022 to 2023.
Move to approve the resolution authorizing the treasurer of the Princeton City School District to file a modified tax budget for 2022 to 2023 fiscal year.
I second it. Motion, Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Wyder?
yes,
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes,
Mrs. Moore?
yes,
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
and the motion passes. Next item, setting the time, dates, and locations for the regular meetings in 2021.
I move that
Before we
the-
make that motion, look and check on your list. There were a couple of question marks on there, so I want to make sure we are in agreement with what those should be.
For the regular meetings, we had two options for the October meeting. One was October 11th, one was October 18th. And typically, we meet on the second Monday, but the October 11th is traditionally our long weekend break. And so this year, in 20, we moved it to the third weekend, or third Monday. So just checking with the board to see if they want to use the second Monday or the third Monday.
I'm flexible.
What
I'll
is
do
your-
either one.
Same here.
say again, Gina,
I was saying
Flexible.
I'm flexible. I'll take either date. I can do either date, whatever works for most of us.
Yeah, I responded with that.
I'm
and
flexible.
I was fine, comfortable with either date.
I suggest we take the one that's not in the winter
The long
weekend.
weekend.
So that would be is it the 18th? The 18th. So October 18th then would be so I move that we set it, well, we also have to do something with November. Is that correct?
That we get on the special meeting.
Oh, that's a
which comes
special meeting.
next.
Okay. So I move that we accept the time, dates, and locations of the regular meetings in 2021 with October 18th being in that list.
I second
I
it.
have a second. It's been moved in second. Mrs. Petter, call the roll, please.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes,
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
yes,
And that motion passes. Now, approval of reserve dates for possible second monthly meetings in 2021. We need to look at that before we make the motion because there were two possible dates in November. I think one of those had to do with the week of Thanksgiving and the other one is the week
It's the last week in
the
November.
last week. So it's a matter of, do we want a meeting the Monday of Thanksgiving week or wait until the following Monday? Any feelings about that?
I don't travel during that time, so for me, it doesn't matter, but I guess for those who may, do you typically go for a longer time after Thanksgiving, or do you, and try to be back by Monday? Or do you leave early? I mean, I guess that's the question. I mean, looking at the
What would
time,
be-
I would say probably the first Monday, but again, for me personally, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
I would suggest the November 22nd date.
November, which is the first Monday.
That's the first
Okay.
one.
Therefore, if there's any travel issues and they filter into the next Monday, we're not affected.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Of course, we can always change
Absolutely.
at another time. All right, so then I make the motion that we approve the reserve dates for possible second monthly meetings, including November 22nd for our 2021 meetings. Can I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Whiter, second. Mrs. Petter, call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes,
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Whiter,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes. And that motion passes.
Can I,
Our last item, approve, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can I say something? I just wanted, I know since we're being streaming this, I wanted someone to just at least touch on the fact of where we're having the meetings at, so there's no confusion. And then maybe even why. Again, so people know exactly what's happening in terms of the meeting. Because I've had some people ask that, you know, what differentiates, and I'm looking at it now and it looks like it'll be very standard. But I just wanted us to touch on that so people know.
Good point. So our first meetings, or the regular meetings, which are generally the second Monday, will be at Matthews Auditorium, and so that we have an ICRC in for that, and also to give us more space and distance. Our second meeting, which is usually the second Monday, will be at the PAC, Princeton Administrative Center. Those are what we call our workshop meetings, and tend to just be working sessions for the board and administrative staff. So those will be at PAC.
Thank you.
Anybody want to add anything or question anything else? Thanks for bringing that up. All right, and our last item, approval to join area chambers of commerce for 2021.
I move to approve the district joining area chambers of commerce for 2021.
Second.
It has been moved in second.
question,
Yes.
what is the list?
What, are you familiar with the ones, the specific list of chambers of commerce that we have?
Good question.
That would be a perfect number. Let me see if they are listed in.
We can always set it aside.
Well, last year, I think we talked about this because I was asking about Woodlawn. And I remember him saying that for every community that's represented in the district, there is a chamber of commerce for most of the communities. Now with Woodlawn and I think a few others, they combined their chambers of commerce into one, but I think they were representing all of the neighborhoods in the district. Or
I think it would
city.
be interesting to have just an accounting of, to that point, which ones we're joining, what is the cost for each, and what is it that we get? If you can.
Yeah,
provide
that would be good.
So
Yeah,
that we just have some idea of what does it entail, or what's that return on that investment?
Okay.
that's a good idea. I like.
I've made a note. We'll get that list and the cost
Thank you.
to the board. I do know that one of the important things, and I believe when Tom Burton became superintendent, he was very active in attending chamber meetings. And of course, we knew at that time that we needed to get our message across to people that we would be heading towards the ballot rather quickly. And that was a good way we could also meet and talk with people.
And since I do community outreach, I have sometimes gone to those meetings and plan to attend as well.
Yes. Okay, well, are we okay with approving that, getting that information on the specifics? We know that, that is what he's doing, right?
Well, I'm not okay with approving something that we don't know we're approving, no.
But could we approve it and get the details later? And then if we don't.
We certainly could.
If we can change them.
We certainly could. I mean, yeah, we know that he has spoken to us before about, the goodwill of the district and trying to keep abreast of the different communities. And like you said, we got 6 different communities and he has done that. So, I mean, I think we could approve it and then, getting the specific report on cost and return on investment, which was suggested early.
I would suggest to John's point, though, that we just start getting in that kind of a habit of just getting cost whenever we're talking about something, so that we're not doing what we're doing right now. So that it's not an after the fact type endeavor. And I know this wasn't something that we thought about, but to that end, just so that we have that going forward.
Yeah.
Okay,
The board can table this item
okay.
and we can add it to another agenda.
That would
When
be,
we have the information.
No, I'm not suggesting that we table it. I think I made the motion and I think someone seconded.
no, I know,
Did we?
yeah, you aren't suggesting we table it, but Mr. Simons would like us to table it.
But with Robert's Rules of Order, did
Yes, we
someone
do have a
second?
motion in a
The
second.
motion is sitting out.
Once you
Okay.
have a motion and a second, you have to carry it through,
All right,
one way or the other.
okay, that's a good point. So the motion again was to approve,
Mhm.
and so we can vote that up or down. So, all right, please call the roll.
Mr. Simons,
Negative.
Mrs. Cleveland,
I'll go with no, table it.
Mrs. Weider,
I'll vote no until we have all the information.
okay. Dr. Hawkins,
No?
Mrs. Moore,
I vote yes.
Okay. All right, so then we will put that on their agenda for the next meeting in January. I always want to say November, I don't know why, but, and then we will get the details on that. All right, nothing else? I move that we adjourn the organizational meeting at 6:26 PM. Can I-
Second,
It's been moved in second. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Weider,
yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. And we will have our tax budget hearing meeting
Yes.
immediately following. Yes. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. No, thank you. This is your meeting.
All right. This is the official tax budget hearing. And at this time, I will just give a few words about our tax budget document. The board has this attached in the regular meeting section under the approval. This is the alternate tax budget form that you approved in the organizational meeting for next year, but you approved this form for last year. So the purpose of the tax budget is an annual filing with the Hamilton County Auditor's Office. We present 2 years' worth of data that lists revenues and expenditures from 3 different funds: the general fund, the bond fund, and the permanent improvement fund. It is required that we submit this to the Hamilton County Auditor's Office by the 20th of January each year. And in essence, what we are doing is a couple things. We're proving to the county and our taxpayers that we need this money, what we're expecting in revenue, in order to meet our expenses for these 2 years. Also, it converts mostly the general fund portion of what we already have on our forecast that we submit twice a year into a calendar year. The county auditor's office runs on a tax collection calendar year basis. So this puts our numbers in 2 different calendar years, 21 and 22 on here. and that's just the general purpose of the tax budget. It's, of course, a ton of numbers. It has all our levy information in there, our bond levies. It has our permanent improvement levy and our property tax. So all those details are included here, most of which, except for the bond and the PI, which you've already seen on our forecast. And that's the tax budget hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
And we asked the board to approve it at our regular meeting.
Okay. So the tax budget hearing. Go ahead.
Do we, on my agenda, it says roll call. We don't really have to do that again, do we?
No, in fact, the board does not actually have to be present for the tax budget hearing. It's just the way Prista sets this up, that it's typically sandwiched in between the organizational meeting and the regular meeting.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
That's fine. If there's nothing else on that, we will adjourn the tax budget hearing meeting and then start our next
Oh my
meeting.
gosh, perfectly on time.
A second.
Do we have to vote on it?
Oh, no, we don't.
No need to vote on that. Good evening and welcome to our regularly scheduled meeting for the Princeton Board of Education on January 11th, 2021. I call the meeting to order. Mrs. Petter, do we roll call?
Dr. Hawkins,
Here.
Mrs. Moore,
Present?
Mr. Simons,
Present.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Here.
Mrs. Wider.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like a motion to approve the agenda or revise it.
I move that we revise the consent agenda to set aside item J for further discussion.
Okay, the J or I?
J.
Okay, good. All right.
And
I is TC here.
can we share with the public what item J is?
Yes. Yeah, because I was looking at it. So your motion is to revise the agenda to remove the item about the strategic plan from the consent agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. And I guess the reason for that, we need to share that. Would you like to make any comments on that or?
Well, briefly, further discussion amongst the board team, which we will do at the workshop, our next meeting.
Okay. So yes, we want a chance to do some more discussions about that. And in fact, would like to have a board only meeting on Monday, January 18th at 2:00 p.m. To hammer out some of the things that we feel need bolstering or filling in. So that item will be removed when we approve our consent agenda. Okay.
A question, please.
Yes.
Since that is a federal holiday, Martin Luther King Day, that meeting would only involve board members, so other staff would not have to come on their holiday, right?
Correct,
Okay, thank you.
correct. Okay, so we still need to vote on that? It was second, was it?
It was, Mrs.
Okay.
Whiter.
Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes,
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Whiter,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes, and that motion passes. So the next item is an inspirational message about Springdale Elementary School. Dr. Phillips?
We are happy to be able to share the inspirational message. We have a video, so we're going to have Mr. Lockhart to put that on.
And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently.
And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal.
And when the danger passed, and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses, and made new choices, and dreamed new images, and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully, as they had been healed.
It was a little hard to hear because of the mask, but it's basically, you have a book that we will share with you. Tanya West-Wright will come up and share that information at some point. But this is definitely about staying at home. It's about kind of like where we are today. People are at home because of the virus, et cetera. And so that's what Lisa tried to convey to the community as well as the Board of Education as well. So it was hard to really kind of understand what they were saying, but that was the whole premise around that.
Very nice.
very nice. I
We'll
like
share more in a minute when we talk about the reason why you have this book.
Okay,
All right?
okay.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you for this. I mean, I can tell from looking at the book, that they did capture some of the key points. So thank you for sharing that with each of us. And would you say something about their recognition?
That is getting ready to, we'll share that information as well. Tanya, will you come up and share the information regarding the Springdale Elementary recognition for the National ESA Award?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to share this very special recognition for Springdale Elementary. So Springdale Elementary has been named a National ESEA Distinguished School. The National ESEA Distinguished Schools Program is a project from the National Association of ESEA State Program Administrators that publicly recognizes schools for their positive educational advances. Springdale was chosen by the Ohio Department of Education based on outstanding performance in closing the achievement gap between student groups for 2 or more consecutive years. Because only 2 schools per state can be selected as a National ESEA Distinguished School each year, this award is an especially prestigious honor for Springdale staff, students, and our district. Springdale will be recognized on the National ESEA Distinguished School website. The building will receive a large banner to display either inside or outside the building, a framed certificate, and all staff members will receive a Distinguished School button to wear during the National ESEA Conference and hopefully They will wear it all the time because they're so proud and so excited. A team from Princeton will be able to attend the National ESCA virtual conference from February 8th through 11th to be recognized and to learn from other distinguished schools across the country. 57 students in this nation were selected, and we are so proud and so ready to congratulate Springdale Elementary and Principal Lisa Timbarge for this wonderful honor. And we do have a certificate from Mrs. Timbarge, if she could come up to receive that, and I'll step down so we can socially distance. So congratulations to Springdale.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
On behalf of the Springdale staff, we are honored to be recognized as a National ESEA Distinguished School. It's gratifying to have our staff recognized for their efforts to grow students and to close achievement gaps between student groups. Special thanks goes to our intervention team, including our before and after school tutoring staff who provide extra support to move students to higher level of achievement. The growth of our students have shown reflects the positive culture we have developed and the high expectations we hold for all of our students. I'd like to recognize the extra programming our staff provides, including student council, Girls on the Run, Chorale, book club, recycling, the math pentathlon, morning announcements, and the talent show. This programming enhances the sense of community in our school, which is essential for students to succeed. I'd also like to thank Tanya Westwright for her support and assistance as we work through the application process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Such an honor.
Yes, we're very proud and to have you representing one of our schools and giving us that national recognition for as a school district and all that you have put into this with your students and your staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. Tanya, did you give her the certificate? You got it? Great, great. Okay. Next is our school board recognition. And so January has always been designated as a school board recognition month. And obviously we do this. We want to show that we really truly appreciate the work that you do. We probably should do this year round. It shouldn't be like an annual thing because you guys do so much for us. You work hard to ensure that students and staff have what they need to make the Viking diff, especially at this particular time. I mean, this year has been very, very difficult, and you guys have supported everything that we've asked you to. So we really do appreciate that. So we do have a resolution. It says, whereas more than 700 Board of Educations oversee and manage the personnel and properties of school districts throughout Ohio. And whereas school board members are elected to establish the policies that provide the framework for their schools. And whereas school board members devote hours of their time each week to provide leadership to their local schools. And whereas school boards fill an important role with members creating and monitoring district plans to make sure students have the tools and skills to reach their full potential. And whereas school boards maintain communications with all segments of their community to keep the public informed of district activities. And whereas school board members advocate for the best interests of the students served in their districts. And whereas throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Ohio school boards have played an important role in providing safe, ongoing instruction to students. And whereas it is important that communities support school boards so that students receive the best education and are prepared to be the leaders of tomorrow. And now, therefore, we, Mike DeWine and John Usted, Governor and Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio, do hereby recognize January as School Board Recognition Month on this first day of January 2021, and it's signed by the governor and the lieutenant governor.
Well, thank you.
So thank you so much for what you do. And, typically we usually have a lot of, fun with this particular recognition. We have our students come, our administrators come up. So Tanya, you want to share a little bit about what's going to be happening henceforth?
Yes, so we were definitely inspired by Springdale's inspirational message and the words of the book. We have all gone through so much, and we truly appreciate the support that the Board of Education has provided. And so the book, we didn't want to sign it because that would have, made us all have to touch everything. But we did list all of the building and district administrators to make sure that you know how much we truly appreciate all that you've done to support us during this very challenging time.
Right.
The book also talked a lot about what we did during the time when we had to stay home. But the end of the book, which is critical and that we'll continue to celebrate, is when we can all come back together and do all of the things that we love to do for the kids. So the book was a very special poem that Springdale found. And we thank Springdale for that idea. And then all of the building administrators want to make sure that we share the book. And then we'll be back later in January with more wonderful items for our wonderful board members.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great. We appreciate it. Is there any other
And
comments?
we will make sure that Ms. Moore and Ms. Cleveland get their books.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Very much.
Christmas in January. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. Well, then moving through with our agenda, the next item would be the consent agenda. We've already, did we actually vote on that? We revised the agenda, but we haven't voted on the consent agenda itself. So we do need a motion for the consent agenda. I move that we approve the consent agenda as revised.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and second. Mrs. Petter?
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you. Approval of the 2021 tax budget. I move that we approve the 2021 tax budget as presented.
Second.
Moved in second. Any questions or additional comments for Mrs. Petter? That's what the whole budget meeting was. Okay. All right, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item, approval of the December 2020 financial and investment report.
I move to approve the December 2020 financial and investment report.
I second it. Ms. Petter, please call the roll.
I have a couple items I want to share with the board.
Okay.
As we look through the documents attached on board docs, we have the December report, which is the standard report from our forecasting tool. December, not a very exciting month as it comes to revenue. I think I told you that December is typically one of our lowest months for revenue, and it was, but right on track with the revenue we received last December. So nothing sticking out there. Just wanted to let you know that the revenue for the first half of the year, you can see, is ahead in the property tax area by about that 3.1 million, which is half the collection of the new tax levy. Once again, thank you to all of our taxpayers in the district for voting for that levy in November of 2019. We now have an entire fiscal year of collection and in our books. So thank you. That revenue is well needed. Of course, we had that blip with COVID where we did lose 1.3 million for 2 years now in state revenue. So that was, of course, not planned, but we do see that that is down over the 6-month period. That's the difference in the state revenue. The other little decrease you see in the first July through December as compared to last year is in the all other revenue. That includes the tangible personal property tax. So we are in the phase out of that. So we will see that decrease as we move through these next several years until it is completely phased out. On the expense side, December of 20 comparing to December of 20, fiscal year 21, again, both running very similarly, very little change there. But when we look on the first half of the fiscal year, comparing July of 20 fiscal year, December to this current fiscal year 21, we can see the increase in salary and benefits. That's because of base and step increases and increases in benefit cost. Purchase services is running a little lower. We saw a little bit of a decrease in some utilities and transportation. And we're assuming that has to do with cost of some extracurricular transportation that we're not providing at the top level that we were, and contests that have been canceled and schedules that have been minimized. But other than that, we're running pretty close to forecast. We will watch those spending areas and purchase services to see how those trend out through the second half of the fiscal year. The investment report is attached, as well as the bank reconciliation and balanced. We have added the COVID expense report during this time period. It's listing the general fund expenses and the grant funds. There are 3 grant funds we have right now: the CARES Fund, the CRF Fund, and the Broadband Fund. We had thought that the Broadband Fund was going to end in December. That has been extended, which allows us a little extra time to spend some of the money. We had some technology that had not been received at this point. We're still having some difficulty getting Chromebooks in-house. And we know that's just a supply demand issue, and that it will catch up, and we'll get those that technology in-house as soon as possible and into our kids' hands. But I did want to say that we're moving through spending our grants. It's going pretty well, trying to keep as much of the COVID cost out of general fund and on these grant vehicles that we have made available to us. The COVID salary and benefit for the COVID leaves, which did expire at the end of December. We still do have some bookkeeping catch up on that in January before we have good solid numbers for that cost. We are up to almost $302,000 in that cost. And those are for the 2 leaves that were provided by federal programming. So hold on, you know, that new law could be passed. We could see that come back, and more expense in that area also. But this is going very well. Thank goodness we have received a good amount of grant funding to help us through this time. The new report added is a result of some conversations with our auditors. They wanted us to report the credit card information to the Board of Education quarterly. We are going to do it monthly because it's just easier. Since I do report monthly, it's just easier to add this on to the financial report. So what you have on this first page is, in essence, a checkoff list that tells you that the Treasurer's Office is doing their job monitoring credit card use. This is a very hot button issue for the audit this year. I do expect next year to be the same. So you can see that we have 3 people in my office that monitor this. I'm not sure it's worth it, but it's what we're doing. So I sign off on it then monthly, and then we will have the board approve it as a part of the financial report. You can see transactions by credit card. And then on the last page, we do a summary of those expenses, and anything that seems like it needs further explanation is on this last page in this box. Please contact me if you have any questions about it. But this does meet the needs of the state law around credit cards. And just having the board approve this now.
Okay.
May I ask a question, Dr.
Yes.
That report, it sounds like it's keeping track of how we use our credit card. Is that right? The
It
report
is
doesn't honor
making sure that the treasurer's office is doing their job to monitor district use of credit cards.
Yeah, and
So-
the report you give to us, that's quarterly, is that what you said? Okay,
It
Now-
is so you can see that my office is doing the job.
now it raised another question in the back of my mind, which is a dangerous thing, but anyway, the question that it raises for me is, when people use our facilities, like whether they rent a building or a room or rent our pool or use our fields, our playing fields, do they pay a fee for that?
We have a building usage form, fee, whole process, and procedures. Yes, we have all that in place. And business operations handles that.
Okay, so if we wanted a report on that, that would come from where? Or is that something you
That
already?
would come from business operations, John Fricke's office.
Okay, okay. So that doesn't come under you at all? Okay.
I can help
Do they turn it
with
into you?
pulling. I can help with pulling the amount of money we receive. I have
That's all I
access to
need
that.
to know. Yeah, I don't want to dig in the weeds, but I'd love to see that on a quarterly basis. And then that way we can see who we're renting to and who we're not. Thank you.
Which at this time,
Nobody.
I'm not sure we're doing any of that. So
That's why it
unfortunately,
Yeah, it would be an easy report to do.
exactly. That was a nice small source of some revenue especially when we could rent Matthews. A lot of people have enjoyed the use of this facility. Of course, our athletic fields had a lot of use outside Princeton students.
Yeah.
We did see some revenue from that. Those are on hold right now.
Mhm. And what might we call that report if I should ever want that report? What is that report called? Or is there a name for it?
You could just ask me about how much revenue we have received from rental facilities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
That's easy. That's easy.
Any other questions? Then Mrs. Petter, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
And that motion passes. Approval of the memorandum of understanding with the Ohio Attorney General for fingerprinting.
I move
I
to,
move to approve memorandum of understanding with the Ohio Attorney General for fingerprinting.
second.
Moved in second. Any questions? Mrs. Petter?
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider.
Yes.
That motion passes. Approval of the consultant contractual agreement with Emmanuel High.
I move to approve the consultant contractual agreement with Emmanuel J. My Life is Art as presented.
Second.
It has been moved in second. Any comment on that? This will be part of Viking University in February.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing that. As you guys remember, we've had him come before. And he really was very moving to those who were in attendance. So I'm glad we're bringing him back.
You want to say a little bit about his background?
Yeah, he was one of the lost boys who migrated across Africa. In fact, I believe he was the youngest foot soldier, and has had a very turbulent time through that. And so he uses that as his basis for going across the world and engaging people in peace. And so his whole message is about how do we do that. And so to that end, he's been in front of just about every major world leader who demonstrates peace. And he continues to garner that everywhere he goes. So we were very fortunate last year that through some of our parents who connected with him, that he was willing to come to Ohio for the very first time. Had never been in the middle of the United States. And so he currently lives in England. And so it was a great opportunity for us, for our student body to be a part of his presentation, and then to hear him talk about his story, which has a book and a movie that's been done based on his life. So again, it's a wonderful opportunity for us, particularly right now, as we are all struggling with that whole concept of peace.
Thank you for
He is going to
sharing.
be doing 2 sessions.
Okay,
He's one of our featured speakers. So if you guys can be a part of that, obviously this is going to be a virtual conference, but we're excited to have him again. He was very well received when he was here before.
thank you. We can look forward to that. Okay, any other comments? Mrs. Petter, call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes,
You're
I
on
had to
mute.
unmute. Thank you, yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes. And the motion passes. Next is approval of the contract with Ohio Writing Project.
I move to approve the contract with the Ohio Writing Project.
Second.
Been moved in second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore.
Yes,
and that motion passes. Next, we move on to the treasurer's report.
Just 2 quick items, just to let everyone know, we have completed the audit process with the audit team, and documents have been uploaded for the federal clearinghouse. The last step is state review, and that really typically doesn't come back to us. The questions then go between the state and the auditing team, and then that is completely closed out, usually by the end of March. We've also applied for the financial awards with GFOA and the Association of School Business Officials. Those applications are shipped out, and we're waiting to hear back from them. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right. Next is our superintendent's report.
I said, wow, that's all she has. Mr. Burton gave me a litany of things. That's not fair.
We thank you for being here in Mr. Burton's absence.
Great.
So,
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity. First of all, I wanted to just share the strategic plan, because I know that was pulled off, and we're going to have more discussions around that. Mr. Burton and I talked last evening, and we talked again on today, and we want you to be able to feel comfortable with what is your plan. We want you to review the plan and provide the edits that's necessary, and then get it back to us. Of course, it sounds like January the 18th is a day that you guys are going to be meeting to have that conversation. But we want to, we welcome the suggestions. We've already discussed some things based upon the email that was sent last night. We know that there are some things that are there that we need to include. So we welcome any suggestions that you all have.
thank
I
you.
just want to share that with you.
Yeah.
January 4th and 5th was our professional learning sessions after the holiday, and it went very well. Had quite, obviously it was virtual, and we're really getting good with this virtual. And the 4th was virtual workshops, and we had many of those for most of our staff. And then the 5th was virtual as well, but that was devoted to building. So the January 4th was really related to more of the district initiatives, And then the fifth was more building initiatives. But that went very well. And then, of course, January 6th and 7th and 8th, students continued to remain in the remote learning environment. And principals shared, as we talked with principals, they shared that the students were logging on, they were engaged. I guess having been in school for a couple of weeks, they were ready to get back. And so that was real exciting. The big thing that I think occurred on the 6th, when students were going to be coming back, was the just that the crisis that occurred in the U.S. Capitol. And so we knew that on the 6th, we knew that we needed to make sure that our students were and our teachers were ready for that if, in fact, there were some questions around that. So Mr. Burton and Ms. West and I got together and collaborated on an email, which was sent out to the district-wide staff. And we provided teachers with resources that they could use if they chose to use it, just to provide space for students to express their feelings. And we didn't have any questions about that. Teachers used some of the resources. Many of the teachers had used some of those resources already because it came through our equity team. And so I think it went very well. We had no questions about it, but I just wanted to share that with you because that was really a concern. It was very well televised. And so students were hearing it, students were seeing it, and we knew they perhaps would have questions around that. Viking University is on Thursday, February the 11th. We have about 64 sessions that's set up. We had our professional development committee meeting today to begin to start finalizing some of those sessions. We've talked about AJ Giuliani being the keynote speaker. He's the author of Empower. I'm not sure if you guys got that book. Did you get the Empower book? Okay. So it really talks a lot about empowering students and giving them choice and voice and things like that, just really to empower their student learning. So he is going to be our keynote speaker, and then he's also going to have a couple of sessions throughout the day with staff as well. And then obviously, we talked about Emmanuel, and we have a couple of other keynote speakers as well. Feature speakers as well. So I think we're on our way. Had a great PD committee meeting today. Chris is really working to make sure that, all of our teachers have access to the links that they need. We're looking at a conference app that they can use as well. Trying to make it a little creative because all day being in front of a computer, sometimes that can't be fun. Right. And, we had during Viking University, we always have fun, pictures, caricatures, just have lots of fun. So we're trying to create that same environment, if you will. So we're continuing to work on that. We had, we had 3 sessions of the COVID testing through the UC Collaborative Health. We tested teachers on November 20th, right before Thanksgiving, November 24th, and December the 18th, right before Christmas. So we had about 335 teachers who actually were tested, and they was all volunteer, and the process went really well, really smooth. And then out of that, we had about 10 staff members who were positive. And so, 5 on the 20th, 3 on the 24th, and 2 on the 18th. And so the neat thing about it was they were on their way out the door for holiday. So either they were going to go get on a plane or not, but now they knew they were positive. In addition to that, they reported that information to us. And so we then began to share the information with our health department so that they could do the contact tracing, et cetera. So that went very well. In fact, the person from UC says, we're going to be continuing to do this until the end of January. Are you interested? I said, no, I think we're done with that for a while, hopefully forever, but. And then Mr. Burton has done a real good job of sharing the information regarding the governor's new regulations around students and staff, who are exposed to a person with a positive case of COVID aren't required to quarantine if they have been properly masked or maintaining social distance. So he shared that information in a question and answer session that we had last Thursday. We shared it again today in our leadership meeting, and really was very clear with our principals around that. So I think they pretty much understand the process. We talked about essential workers, that our staff are essential workers, and so they have to follow that protocol as well. If they are exposed outside of the school, if they're not exhibiting any of those symptoms and they're not positive, obviously, then they can return to work as long as they're continuing to follow the protocol, mask, social distance, et cetera. So we did share that with our staff. We kind of look at this as it relates to our students. A lot of our students were having to quarantine just because of the exposure of a student in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And obviously when that happens, kids are not in school. And we know that remotely, they're not getting what they totally need sometime if they don't have the supervision at home, et cetera. So this is going to keep more of our students in school. Yeah. And they've already talked about school is a safe place. They've done enough research to indicate that now. So I want to share that. We've been working with our association and with Princeton regarding the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, because it ended December 31st. And so Chris and Dr. Jameson have been working closely with Bronson to really kind of put an MOU in place to support our teachers, et cetera. So that MOU Bronson's going to be working on that. And obviously, eventually you will have to approve the MOU. But right now we're into that. We're kind of into pre-COVID times. Chris said that today at our leadership meeting, because we had the luxury of being able to use the leave that that was put in place. Now it expired. And so we're into that pre-COVID times, but once we get the MOU worded right, everybody agrees upon it, TSSA, PACE agrees on it, then we may be able to do some retroactivity if that is the case. Correct, Chris?
We will ask the board for approval.
Yes, we will ask the board for approval. So that's kind of where we are. You saw the Vineyard text that Mr. Burton sent, mm-hmm. and that was very exciting to receive $150,000. And there's a press release that's going to be coming out. And I just want to read a little bit of it, okay, if I will. The Vineyard Church presented Princeton City Schools $150,000 for, there it is.
There's the check.
For the electronic devices, including Chromebooks for middle school and Wi-Fi access for their students. School district has many students who have unequal access to online educational resources, and church members donated to help close that gap. The pastor says that Matt Macy, the lead pastor at the Vineyard Church, said, once we learned of the challenges facing students, we had to do something. It's just the right thing to do. We couldn't be more excited to impact the students and families of our community. So we're really excited about that. Mr. Burton did a great job.
Yes, we're all really excited about
Yes.
a receipt of $150,000. So,
Absolutely.
yes, I mean, it's
So when
great.
you really think about, I can remember Mr. Burton saying that, when we first decided to do remote, we not decide, but we had no choice but to do the remote back in March. We started looking at how we can bring the district to at least 1-to-1 with our high school. Started out with 8th graders through 12th graders, and now then we started adding middle school. So really, with the grants that we have in place that we received from the CARES Act, as well as grants from organizations and our partners, we should be able to have most of our kids with computers, which is a 1-to-1 situation, basically 3rd grade through 12th grade, which is excellent. So, so we're really excited about that. We really are, because that definitely is a big divide. It's huge in our community, just because of our socioeconomic, status of our families. So we are really excited.
And if Tom Burton had been here, he would have stopped us during the consent agenda, and we would have discussed this giant check we received.
Right.
So maybe we should have a quick photo op with that extremely generous donation.
Yes.
Well, so we can have a documentation of that and with the board.
Right.
Yes.
So you want to do
We'll get
that
that
right
done.
now? Okay.
Mary and Gina, you will be in this picture on the TV screen.
Oh, right.
Some distance and stand right here.
That's great.
And I'll keep distance and stand here. We were all
Fantastic.
smiling.
Yeah.
And it's not just the devices, it's the ability to get connectivity
Absolutely.
so that people will have the internet and be able to use their devices,
Right.
because we have these big gaps in our district of where, there is no service. So that's what we're most excited about, and that's what that will be used for.
Right. So we are very thankful to the Vineyard Church.
Yes, extremely so.
And I know Chris will move forward with making that
The check hit
that
the bank today.
$150,000 as a donation.
The check at the bank today. So we're looking forward to the technology team putting in requisitions.
Right. Yes.
Wondering if you'll be able to fit that check in your purse.
It won't go in her purse. It won't even go to the ATM machine, I don't think.
Seriously,
And then I just have,
I do want to applaud churches like the Vineyard, who actually do so many wonderful things throughout the year. There are other things they've done too. And so often church communities, they do things overseas or far away, but the Vineyard hits us right where we live. And this is just another prime example of how wonderful they are as a church, understanding that they're part of their local as well as larger community. That's just wonderful. And thank you to Mr. Burton and to Dr. Phillips for whatever role you all played in making that happen.
Yes.
yes,
Thank you for those comments.
thank you.
I did have one more question
And
for Dr. Phillips. Dr. Hawkins, may I ask?
Yes, go ahead.
We were talking about COVID, and I'm wondering, where do teachers stand on the order of people that receive the vaccine? I'm not sure. I hear conflicting things in the news, but considering the roles teachers play in such close contact to
The vaccine on your list.
yeah, I do. I have
It's on
vaccinations on my
her
list.
list.
I'm
I
sorry.
just wanted to share about the vaccinations. We've started the process of identifying the staff in each of the buildings. so that we can make sure that all of our staff is accounted for. There's a survey that the department has given us, and we have to complete that survey. John Trickey is going to be completing the survey for POC and PAC, and each of the buildings, each of the principals will complete the survey, listing all of their staff that is in the school. We have some ESC staff members as well as Educational Service Center staff. So we will be also making sure that they are part of that list as well. We know that the health department is going to, the Hamilton County Health Department is going to provide us with some nurse support. And so then fortunately, we have 6 nurses, LPNs and RNs on our staff as well. So they will be a part of working together to provide the vaccinations once they are here. Mr. Burton was saying that some people are saying that this might happen as quick as February. He is saying that it's probably not going to happen until March. So they haven't really given us an actual date, but we're getting close. So that's kind of where we are with the vaccinations at this point in time. And we shared that with our principals today, and that was a question that our staff asked at the Q&A. Mm-hmm. These Q&A sessions are really, really good. I mean, they're hour long. You wouldn't believe how many staff members hang around for that after the school day, or, because they could just, it's on Zoom, but they could do other things, cooking, and because it's 5:30 or 5 o'clock is when our meetings are, and we get 200, close to 300 staff members each time. And they really ask some very good questions, and we give them the opportunity to see the questions ahead of time as well. And we see them so that we can prepare to answer those questions. So that's kind of where we are with vaccinations. The other thing that I wanted to share is I think Mr. Burton last time talked about an equity video that the League of Innovative Schools Digital Promise Educational Leadership Institute put together. Tanya was right, Trisha Roddy, myself, and Mr. Burton were interviewed by the League of Innovative School, asking just questions about what are we doing to meet the equity challenges in our school. And so the video he sent us a video maybe a week ago or more, and we were surprised that it's a great video. Mm-hmm. They're going to now use it in one of their synchronous sessions that is in January, and we're going to be a part of that session as well. So we're excited. It's a YouTube video, so I'm sure that Mr. Burton will send the link to you all to make sure that you see it as well. But basically, we're just talking about what we do every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was really, really simple, talking about what we do every day and how we support kids, all of our kids, to really, meet the challenge of equity and in the classroom, outside the classroom, et cetera. So we talked a lot about how we supported the students with the Wi-Fi and the Chromebooks, et cetera. And then lastly, I sent out to staff a diversity inclusion calendar for the start of the year. And this calendar lists all of the activities during the month around diversity. So African Americans, Latino, Italian, I mean, it focuses on everything. And so each teacher received that on Friday. And, the one that obviously is coming up is our Black History Month, which is typically focused in February. So we're looking for our teachers to move forward with having some activities around that. What we want to do is we don't want to make this something that we just do it this month. We want to be able to say, these are the things that we do every month. We celebrate. We celebrate people. We celebrate our students. And so that's what we're doing. And we can share more of that as we get closer to the end of the month with I know our January 25th board meeting is coming up, just so that you can get more specific ideas about what's coming up in February. All right.
That's great.
That's it.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you. I've been, questions, comments, please. I'll try to be brief. Since I've been on this school board, I've been asking for that calendar for us to make sure teachers are aware, students are aware, because if we're one of the most diverse school districts in the state, we ought to darn well show it. And that is great. Thank you so much to you and Mr. Burton, Lottie Dottie, and everybody who had anything to do with that. Thank you.
We will make sure that we share that with you all on the 25th as well. So you'll get a link
copy of that. Yeah,
Great news.
that is great. That's fantastic. Other comments or questions?
Oh, I do have
Well, good
one more,
thing.
Dr. Hawkins.
Okay.
And it might be premature to ask it, but I'm wondering if Dr. Phillips may know, or if someone else may know, when it comes to getting the vaccine, has the state of Ohio put anything into place for people who don't want to take it? Like, say there are people who for some reason don't want to take the vaccine. And I'm wondering, from a policy perspective, has the state of Ohio said anything about that?
I cannot respond to that question at this time, Gina, but that is a question that has come up.
Yeah.
Because it is a choice.
I think right now
and so we have to probably think about how we're going to deal with that.
We'll wait and see what the governor says on that, I guess. Thank you.
I'm sure it's coming. I think right now they're just trying to get as many vaccinated as possible. And so, we're not at that point yet where we have mass vaccination yet, but I would expect that question to be answered at some point.
Some companies have made it mandatory, and some it depends on what's in their collective bargaining.
Right.
Okay.
We'll get there.
So we're trying to stay ahead of that curve as well, but yeah. Okay, any other questions? Those are great questions. Okay. Anything else? Any other business to be brought before this board?
Did you say, Dr. Phillips, that the Viking University is going to be all virtual?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Viking University has been such a really great treat and a wealth of information. I've attended parts of a couple of them, so we'll look forward to just seeing some of the many workshops that people are doing. So
same here.
Yeah, we're excited
share
about
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe sit in on one or two of them. They're always great.
They are always good.
Yes.
Very, very good information.
Yes. Anything else? If not, I move to adjourn this meeting
I second
at
it.
7. All right, at 7:27 p.m. It's been moved in second. Ms. Tedder, call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
And that motion passes, and we will see you all on January the 25th at 6:30 p.m. And in the meantime, be safe and go Vikes.
Go Vikes.
Go Vikings.